we're joined by Dan Perry. He's a world affairs analyst, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Dan, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, how might France's recognition of Palestine impact its diplomatic relations within the Middle East, especially with Israel?
Well, it clearly creates tension between France and the government of Israel. Obviously, the recognition on the ground has basically no effect because it changes nothing of the reality between Israelis and Palestinians. If France and other European countries, however, choose to punish Israel for not going along with this, they do have some leverage because Israel's GDP, a third of it comes from exports, and Israel's largest trading partner is Europe. So if they kick Israel out of its associate membership of the European Union, if they start imposing customs, if they shut down the technological R&D cooperation and access to funds that Israel has, all of this could impact Israel. But the real issue, the fundamental question, is whether those who say that this will end up strengthening Hamas are right. The idea is that even people who want a two-state solution, and that may not include the current Israeli government, but it may well include most Israeli people, whether they're right in fearing that a two-state solution is made less likely, not more likely, by this recognition because it strengthens Hamas. Absolute precondition for Israel taking the risks that it would need to take in order to enable an independent Palestine to arise, specifically a military pullout from most of the West Bank. A condition of that is that Hamas is no longer a factor in Palestinian political life, and certainly it doesn't have a military force that could end up taking over the West Bank the way they took over Gaza and then threaten Israel very, very significantly. Remember that the West Bank surrounds Jerusalem on three sides and is a strategic highland overlooking the entire center of Israel. They can't take that risk if Hamas is around. And the tragedy is that Hamas is currently using this recognition by European powers, not just France, but maybe even more significantly Britain, the former colonial power in Palestine, to claim validation for their strategy of having invaded Israel, massacred in the most barbaric conceivable savagery over 1,000 people, and sparked a war that brought disaster upon Gazans. So this suddenly looks like maybe a logical way to comport oneself if the result is that the long-awaited recognition of Palestine by major European powers comes about. And Hamas, of course, is claiming such validation. And if the result is Hamas being strengthened among Palestinians, then Palestine will be less likely, not more likely, as a consequence.
And Dan, since you've mentioned UK and how they were the colonial power back then, do you think UK has any responsibility towards making a peaceful solution in Israel and Palestine now?
I mean, it's subjective whether a former colonial power has responsibility. I think the UK's main responsibility is to make peace within the UK, which last I checked, is in the throes of a lot of local agitation over relationships with migrant communities and many other problems that are in part self-imposed. I think the UK means well. I think Starmer genuinely is a friend of Israel and wants to do right by the Palestinians also, whether he's driven by a manifest destiny of a former Britannia ruling the seas. I cannot say. I actually don't think they have a responsibility because of that. I think they have the same responsibility as any other power that is, perhaps the number 6 economy in the world and wants to use that leverage and that wherewithal for good and not for bad. The UK, too, stands accused, potentially, of helping Hamas.
Now, some of our guests have also criticized and shed a question upon whether it's too late to recognize Palestine and hope that it's going to bring peace, it's going to change things. What's your analysis?
I agree that recognition itself is not going to actually bring about a state. The recognition in some ways is nonsensical because There is a internationally accepted definition of statehood, and that is found in the Montevideo Convention of 1933, and it involves recognized borders over a defined population and a government with the ability to administer and tend to and secure those borders and that population. And none of this applies in the case of so-called Palestine, which is not just in the West Bank occupied by Israel, but in Gaza occupied by Hamas, that does not want a Palestinian state, but instead wants to destroy Israel and create one state over the entire territory. Hamas's entire raison d'etre is to fight efforts by Israel and the Palestinian Authority to partition the land into two states. That's why they've been doing terrorism for the past 35 years, to get the Israelis themselves to not trust the Palestinians and to oppose the concessions needed to enable that state to arise. But I think if we take a step back, we need to understand something fundamental. There is a narrative that basically says that a Palestinian state is some kind of favor that Israel is doing to the Palestinians, or a concession to the Arabs, and it exacts a price from Israel. It does exact a territorial price from Israel, but the net result for Israel is positive. Israel has to get rid of these territories, because if it does not, then the combined territory of Israel plus the West Bank plus Gaza is half Arab. And that's either going to be not a democracy or it won't be a Jewish-dominated state. And the Zionist project wants to establish a country with a Jewish majority that can be democratic but still Jewish, because most people are Jews the way most people in Poland are Poles. That can't work unless a Palestinian state comes about. And therefore, through that prism, we may slowly come to understand that a Palestinian state, perhaps more than a favor to the Palestinian Arabs, is a necessity of Israel. The question is, though, how to bring that about. And again, these recognitions at this time, which may strengthen Hamas, which is an opponent of the Palestinian state, highly ironically, makes a Palestinian state less likely. This is the irony that these well-meaning but probably naive Europeans and others, the Australians, the Canadians, need to be confronted by. And the only way around it is for them at this point to condition any further assistance to Palestine, including reconstruction of Gaza, on Hamas disarming and going away. This becomes the central point that the world community must attend to.
Right. And then building on that, what do you think, what challenges does the EU face in balancing support for Palestine and Israel with maintaining strong diplomatic relations, particularly with Israel?
Well, they're never going to have good relations with this Israeli government. And maybe they shouldn't. This Israeli government is at loggerheads with not only much of the world and certainly with Europe, but also with its own population. The majority of Israelis, well over 70%, want an end to the war in Gaza, not because they want Hamas to remain, but because they want to rescue the hostages. And they're noticing that the strategy of the war leads to a forever insurgency with nonstop death and destruction. They want a different strategy. So the government of Israel is problematic. But with Israel in general, if the EU and the recognizers of Palestine want good relations with Israel writ large, perhaps with a new moderate government that seems likely to arise after next year's election in Israel, they're going to have to really understand that all progress goes through the roadblock of Hamas, that Hamas must be disarmed and made to go away. This needs to be the be-all and end-all of their efforts going forward.
With that, thank you very much, Dan Perry, for always joining us and sharing that insight.